Hey, greetings, Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. So, just a brief recap. Brad and his son, Salcha River. He saw this thing standing there. It just looked dark. He didn't really notice what it was, and then all of a sudden it moved real fast and you know, went from static to animated, and he was heading back to the cabin with his boy. They left the fishing tackle right there. I've had a chance to talk to him and his son again since part one. Anyway, just chronological stuff. And so where we left off, he had just gotten up on the bank where the trail cuts back towards the cabin, set his son down and turned because he had a line of sight where he was perceiving this thing was going to come out of the brush. And he was standing there with his 45-70. His son's on the ground crying. Now, as he's standing there, his heart's racing. He doesn't know what's going to happen. All he knows is he's going to protect his son regardless. So he's aiming his 45-70 towards the direction of the brush and stuff. And so as he's standing there, he's not seeing anything. He hears the movement coming, but it hasn't broken through the brush yet, right? And there's not a whole lot of leaves left on the trees. This is after hunting season. This is further up north. You got to understand, in Alaska, come September 1st, in some places, things go from green and 90 the week before, 90 degrees out, like up by, you know, Ruby and stuff, to literally the next day, bitter cold, frozen puddles, and everything's yellow and orange. I mean, it's literally that quick. So, you know, he's dealing with not a whole lot of leaves on the brush, but it's so thick and dense, he can't see through it. So as he's standing there, he's looking around all directions, like on a constant. He's on the verge of losing his shit, you know. And I could totally understand, because, you know, he said in that moment he was less worried about himself and worried about something getting to his son. And so as he's standing there, he hears it come up to the edge of the brush, and he knows it's back in there. He can hear it moving. He doesn't have a line of sight on it with the gun. And there's so much brush, he didn't want to waste any ammo. So he stands there a few moments and nothing happens. It goes dead quiet. He said that it got so quiet. And he's telling his son to calm down. And his son calms down. His son's being quiet, just kind of sobbing, telling him, I'm scared, whispering, I'm scared. And he goes, I know, son, I know. You know, we'll get out of here. And so what he does is he has his son stand up. He squats down, has his son jump on his back to piggyback him, right? He's holding the rifle. He's watching their back trail. And he turns around and he's going through the trail as fast as he can, right? He cuts through, gets up to the cabin. And when he gets to the cabin door, in view of the front of the cabin, he notices sleeping bags. Some of the totes had been drug outside of the cabin, and stuff was kind of scattered about. The cook stove was upside down. It had been kind of mashed and twisted. The sleeping bags were basically laid out how they were up in that little loft. Just laid out, kind of opened up a little bit, and just kind of laid the way they would have been up in the loft. Real strange stuff. So he's kind of like, what the hell? He's looking around. And again, he was thinking important stuff, but with his shoulder holster, his chest holster, he had important paperwork and all his other stuff in that holster. So he had all his stuff. So when he gets up there, he goes inside and looks real quick. There's nothing. It funky smell in there. He said the little ladder that went up to the loft was kind of broken off a little bit and looked like something obvious, very heavy, was messing with it or bumped into it or something. He said that wood stove that was in there had been basically twisted sideways and pushed up against the wall. And these little wood stoves, they're kind of small, but they're still a few 100 pounds. So it's just not like you can just shove it out of the way kind of deal. He's immediately freaking out. He's like, what the hell? You know what I mean? It's damn near pandemonium, because now his son is picking up on his vibe of just freaked out. So he reaches, he had a small bag with extra ammo and some other stuff, and he found that. He got the extra ammo. He's got that little bag. He has his son wear this little miniature duffel bag like a backpack on his back, right? He's helped dad. Now, from his son's perspective, he said that one of the things he remembered so clearly was the smell. He said it was like a mix of rotten eggs and like rotten meat and like a real bad pee odor, right? And that's what he remembers very vividly. He said the rest is kind of murky because there was so much stuff scattered around. You know, he couldn't really, as a child, he couldn't really make it out. But as they're standing there and his dad's doing what he's doing and he's got this little duffel bag on, they hear this shriek scream coming from outside, but it's not from the direction of the plane. It's off to their left. If you're facing out the door, it'd be off to your left, like downriver ways. And immediately, it was so loud. He said the whole place was just damn near shaken from this scream, right? It was real high-pitched shriek, but there was this low tone that was real barely audible. Said it was all bad. It was all bad, because now he's feeling surrounded. Last he knew, this thing was over near where the plane is, and now there's noise coming off to his left, right? So he tells his son, okay, here's what we're gonna do. You got to keep your eyes out looking around behind us, but hold on tight, and we're gonna go to the plane. You keep an eye out. I will, you know, just let me know if you see anything and what have you, and you know, Dad'll take care of it. And you know, Brad felt bad because he's putting his son in a position that he's really not in a position to be in. You know, he's young, he's just a little boy, he's 8 years old, and now he has to be the lookout. He has to, you know, use critical thinking and all these things to help keep them both safe. And he put that weight on his son's shoulders, and that really hurt his feelings that he was in that position, and now his son has to carry that burden of looking out behind them. You know what I mean? And as a dad, I get it, especially with the young boy. You know, any young child, just not necessarily a boy, but just in general. So he said when they went out the door and they got to the bottom of the steps, his son says, ow. And he turned around, you know, he's looking all around. He's like, what? And he goes, something hit me. And so he's looking around. He goes, well, what hit you? And he's, I don't know. It bounced off my head, right? And so immediately he's like, okay, something's throwing stuff at my son. We got to go. He starts booking, not full on running, but moving as fast as he can, telling his son, keep a lookout, son. You're doing great. You're doing great. Just reassuring him the whole way, right? Because they got 300 feet, 100 yards at least to get to the plane, right? So he said just as they were coming up to where the little trail cut off to the right that leads over to the plane, he noticed something fly by him, and it bounced on the ground, and then he looked. It was a pine cone. And he goes, and in that moment, he was like, okay, he was hit with a pine cone, because, you know, it's just, that's what he was putting together. And so they continue on down the trail. He says, keep a lookout, son, keep a lookout. When they get to the bank where he had just been standing a little bit before, holding a bead on the brush, he let his son down off his back because it's a drop bank right there. He has to lower his son down. He lowers his boy down and hands him the rifle to hold and tells him back away, and he jumps down real quick, grabs a rifle from his son, has his son get back on his back. He's facing back towards the cabin at this point, because where he just looked, it's open. He sees a plane over there. There's no brush obscuring his view, so he noticed there was nothing there. So immediately his focus is on their back trail where those pine cones are being thrown. He said that he never felt so inadequate. He said what he saw once his son jumped back on his back, looking back up that trail, were two of these things just barely in view. They were about, he said, about maybe 60 feet away tops, but they were on either side of that little trail they had just came down, and they were both doing this number, just kind of looking. He said in that moment it looked more like a curious thing, and because obviously they had him dead to rights, they could have easily snatched him up and his son. For whatever reason, they were standing there doing this, and they were almost synchronized with their swaying back and forth, right? So now he's got another conundrum. He's got to get his son in the plane. He's got to warm it up, but he can't just, there's no reversing the plane. You know what I mean? He's got to push it off. He's got to untie it and push it off from the bank. And so he's mentally mapping out, how am I going to do that? He goes, well, what I'm going to do is I'll leave the pontoon lines tied off. I will cut the rope on the lines that go from the wings down. I'll cut those ropes. I'll leave the pontoons tied off until the engine warms up. Then I'll step out of the door, cut those off, push off. He didn't give a shit if he got wet pushing the plane backwards, because typically what he would do is just turn it around, bring the floats back up against the shore as it warmed up. He didn't have that kind of time. Yeah, he didn't have that kind of environment that gave him that luxury. So what he does is he fires up the plane, and he had cut the lines. His son's in the back, laying down low. He told his son, keep low. Had his son put on the muffs and, you know, with the little mouthpiece, the comms. And he had the comms on, and he has this, it's basically like an old phone cord, you know, it's all coiled up, you know, for stretching and whatnot. So he has it on as he cut the lines, reassuring his son, because the prop is going. It's pretty damn loud, you know what I mean? So he's talking into the mic, son, everything's okay, just stay low, blah, blah, blah. Well, as he's doing that, he hears this clink, 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 which it had to have been big enough to make enough noise to get his attention with a prop going. You got to understand this. His immediate fear was rocks and the thin aluminum skin on his plane. So he's like, oh, geez. And so he gets back inside the plane, and he's looking. The other door is still kind of open. He's looking out, and he knows he has to shut that door. You know what I mean? And whatnot. There's things to do still, but he's looking to see what the hell. He notices where they jumped down from the bank, there was one of these things squatted down doing this number with his hands, like a juggling motion, but it was squatted down, hands just above the ground, spread out pretty wide, and doing this number like it was juggling something that wasn't there, kind of motion, right? He said that was the damnedest thing he ever seen. He was focused on what it was doing versus trying to concentrate on what it looked like. He said it looked like tan leather and black eyes, and that's what he remembers most, because he was watching its body movements and looking for the other one at the same time. Freaked out. The plane is warming up. He knows he's still, he's still got moments before it is ready. So what he does is he grabs the rifle, and he gets down into the water and has a rifle on the pontoon, and he's looking under the plane back at this thing, still not moving, squatted down, doing this juggling motion, which is the damnedest thing. Anyway, so he cuts the pontoon lines, which wasn't an easy task. He crawled over the one, cut from underneath the plane, cut the one, crawled back up and over, cut the other one, and pulls the plane. And what he does is he gets to the inside of the pontoon, and he walks the plane out, turns it around, and pushes back up against shore, right? Now, these pontoons, you got to understand, they have these little guides in the back for, you know, turning when you're in the water, right? They're just little rudders. Well, there's a lever that lifts them up and lowers them down inside the plane. It's just a little lever. It drops them and picks them up, right? So what he does is, just before he turns the thing around, he jumped back up in there, pulled that lever up to where those little guides kick up, you know, those little rudders kick up. He gets back down, crawls underneath again, so he's protected on both sides by the pontoon. He had to take his headset off to make this happen. And he pushes out, turns the plane around, and kind of backs it to where it's not catching the current too hard, because he still has a little bit of time for it to warm up. Now he feels a lot better about the situation because they're facing the right direction to taxi away. You know what I mean? Again, there's no reverse on these little planes. So he climbs back up and he's looking. This thing is still 65, 70 feet at the most away, doing this number. And he says, so now it's off his left-hand side because he's back in the plane at this point. The current isn't really affecting him where he's sitting. His motions in the water are making more of an effect than the current where he was. The deeper channel was across the way, and so he was relatively in a safe place as far as the water current goes. Now, he said as he was sitting there, he's looking off at this thing. He's got his door wide open and he's got his rifle down. He's not pointing it directly at it because this thing is really, it's not doing anything other than this weird motion. He's continually looking all around, made sure the other door was shut, and he's got his comms on and he's talking to his son. Son, just stay low. You know, we're good. Dad got it turned around. You got to reassuring him, right? Because his son's still crying. Now, all of a sudden, he hears an impact. Bang! And he looks, and the little window right behind him, which is basically a A-shaped kind of window, one of the smaller ones, it was fractured, right? And it was obvious something impacted it that he's thinking rock. So he's like, oh, hell no, hell no. He's right about ready to get moving in this plane, and now they're chucking rocks, and it broke his window. So immediately he lifts up the gun and pops around at this thing. He said he kind of shot from the hip, just raised up and boom, fired a shot, levered in another round, and this thing took off out of view up that dry washout spot. Breaks out that direction, off to, you know, back behind him, going around. And he was like, screw this. It's almost warm enough. I'm gonna get this show on the road, basically. So he powers up and he pulls away from shore. You know, he dropped in the rudders and he was doing his thing. He taxied down river, and at this time, again, overcast. It's low ceiling. He was very unsure exactly, you know, distance before he banks to the left and so on. And he's hoping that, you know, in his mind's eye, I'll clear this mountain here off to my left when I take off, because he had to go down river, taxi, turn around, and come back up river to take off, right? So he does that. He taxis down, and at this point, he tells his son, it's okay, keep an eye out. Tell Daddy if you see them. Tell Daddy if you see them. So his son, he wasn't paying attention. His son said, okay, Dad. Well, his son, what he'd done is where he was laying down, he climbed up and over and then ended up plopping right next to his dad, right? Fair enough. Brad said nothing to him, said, you know, strap in, whatever. And his son's looking out the window. Now, this is from his son's perspective. When they were taxiing downriver and he had just jumped over or whatever, and his dad got enough distance to turn around and start powering up to come upriver to take off, right? He said as they turned around, he noticed one off to his right. It was coming out into the water a little ways, and it was squatting down. And from what his son said, this thing was doing this weird juggling things with his hands. And this is the first I've ever heard of that. That it's just, I mean, you know, what do you do with that? God only knows what it was doing. So he's watching and he points it out to his dad, and his dad's like, I see it, son, I see it. And he's powering up, right? He's got his flaps ready to go. And Brad said as soon as he was getting to the point and he lifted off, because most experienced pilots, they'll lift one pontoon up and then pull the other one out just to break the friction of the water, right? Break water tension. So as he does that and he's gaining altitude, he looks off to his right past his son, and that same one that he assumes he had popped a shot at was squatted down. So there was one squatted further down below the cabin on the river doing this weird juggling motion with his hands, and this other one that he popped a shot at that was originally doing that was doing the same thing, squatted down right near where the plane was originally. He said he gained enough altitude, he was real nervous getting into the clouds, and not sure. So he's counting to himself, and then starts gaining more altitude and banks off to the left, praying at that point that he didn't just sentence him and his son to death, right? And after a minute or two, you know, he obviously cleared the mountain because he's still alive and gaining altitude, and he knows he's above any mountains at this point. And then they break through the clouds. There's sunlight, everything. It was like being reborn, he said. He felt a huge sense of relief. So he gets back. He gets son to mom, explains everything. He goes to his uncle. He's got stuff to retrieve. You know, he had stuff that he felt he needed to go back for, but he wasn't taking his son. He gets his uncle and his uncle's good friend. So he gets back. Son goes with his mom and stuff, and you know they're dealing with the aftermath of this. He needed to go get his stuff, and so in the interim, getting connected with his uncle and making the arrangements and all that, because this is all, you know, he's trying to make it happen right away before everything freezes up and all that kind of stuff. You know, he wants to go and get his stuff. Well, a lot of people say screw that or whatever, but you know, when you have certain things that you inherited and that, you know, you make use of them over the generations, you have a, almost like as a man, you have an obligation to keep those things, you know, for, you know, your heritage and, you know, that type of thing, right? Anyway, so he had some stuff that he definitely wanted to retrieve if it was still retrievable. So he gathers his uncle brings his friend. Now, he said when they flew back up, they basically flew to the Richardson, to the Salcha, and then followed the Salcha up, back up to the North Fork there, past the splits. He said he saw a bunch of people in boats and canoes on the lower portion, and then once they got to a certain point, it was really no activity. He said they went through the little valley where the cabin was, try to spot from the air, you know, anything going on before they landed and whatnot. And so there was nothing going on. Came back around, came in, landed, parked basically where he did before. However, this time, plane was facing out and it was already warmed up. They had only planned on being there as long as it took to gather stuff up. He had his uncle to keep guard and his uncle's buddy. And both these two gentlemen, Athabascan natives, they were not playing games. They were well attuned. They dealt with things similar before. And so they're on point. A good portion of his stuff was gone. He didn't know if these things took it or if someone came along and was like, geez, who left his cabin a mess? You know, that kind of thing. Thankfully, there was one smaller tote that he was concerned about with some family heirlooms in it and stuff, just old, you know, like an old compass and some other stuff that really meant a lot to him, some honest keepsakes. Luckily, that tote was still, it was a small, flatter Tupperware one, you know, and luckily that was there untouched. And he retrieved that, grabbed the other miscellaneous stuff that was still around, and they went back to the plane. Now, at the plane, because everything was calm, there were songbirds and stuff, the tone, the mood was totally different. It wasn't as ominous, right? Well, he's sitting there walking his uncle and his friend through. Hey, we were just down over here when I saw it, you know, bolt and all this kind of stuff, right? And so his uncle's listening, but the whole time his uncle's listening, he's looking around, and same with his friend. And they walked back to where the trail was, and they were looking for sign of tracks. And there was a couple you could see, you know, you can see tracks in there. They were like stepped on each other and that kind of thing, but they were, you know, a good 17 inches, 18 inches long. About one of them was about 7 inches wide at the heel. And they were just discussing it. Meanwhile, all eyes are looking around. His uncle says, you know, we should probably get going. And, you know, everyone agrees, yeah, let's get out of here. You know, we got what we came for, you know, whatever. He said when they got back, they were getting back into the plane, up behind the cabin, which he didn't know for sure how far away, but up back behind the cabin, the very exact same, like, high-pitched squeal scream they heard inside the cabin as they were retreating to the plane, him and his son. He said it was identical. He said it was the same pitch. There was a lowness to it that you couldn't hear, but it was there, almost feeling it. And this shriek just gave them chills to their bones, like, let's go. So that was all the motivation they needed. They all hopped in and whatnot, squared things away, fired up, and flew out of there. Another portion from his son's perspective is that when he was sitting there and saw the man in the hood, the fur hood out the window, it was something that he never fully expressed. But remember, I mentioned he had the feeling like he wanted to go out and play. And then it was immediately changed to fear. Well, what caused that, he said, is this thing was, in essence, mind speaking to him, come outside and play. And he never fully verbalized that to his dad. And he didn't know how to, because he felt so weird about it. Like, he you know, in the mind of an 8-year-old, what do you do with that? You know, someone's talking to me in my head. You know, I mean, even adults, you know, they could say mind speak all they want, but in the moment of that, what the hell? You know, what? And as an adult, it's kind of real hard to even speak about, you know what I mean? Let alone in, you know, in context of being a little 8-year-old boy, not knowing what the hell is going on. But I want to thank them. I want to thank Brad for sharing that. And also, I'd like to thank all those people that reach out and call, ask questions. That's why my number's there. If you got any questions about anything I could particularly answer, which there ain't no experts here, I'll be happy to relay whatever information I can. Special thanks to Mark Frank. I appreciate your support of the channel. I'm looking forward to getting that, and once I do, then I'll share that portion of it once that package arrives and stuff. And then what else? Oh, special shout out to Stephen Halstead down in Salem, Oregon. He was the one that shared the I put it in the opening of this video briefly. It's from a weather cam. Understand that photo was taken, and it's one frame out of 4 minutes of video. One frame where this thing was there and gone. There, gone. One frame. And that's from a weather cam on Valley Hoo in Dutch Harbor. Strange. High strangeness, man. I got no answer for that. Just crazy, crazy shit. And I want to thank all those people that reach out. I appreciate you. And again, thank you, Brad, for sharing that. I know it was very difficult. Everyone kind of, in a certain way, kind of feels foolish at first when they're expressing what they went through. And I get it. I get it. No one wants to put themselves out there because of that ridicule that comes back. But you know, I want to thank you for persevering and sharing anyway, and everyone who shares, you know, and thank you all, and we'll catch you on the next one.